welcome to the full webinar series. We do have a few more people who are due to join us, but we are recording today's session. So I know everyone's very busy and got a lot on at the moment. So thank you very much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. Today, we're lucky to be joined by our partners at Rosterfy, who are here today to talk around membership engagement, volunteer engagement, and the work that they're doing at the moment and the work they're seeing organisations complete at the moment through this COVID-19 period. So a big welcome to Bennett Merriman, who's the head of partnerships at Rosterfy and one of their co-founders. Bennett, thanks for joining us today, and I'll hand it over to you.
No problems. Thank you, Cam, and thanks to this for the invitation to come and present today, and thanks to those who have jumped on, and I'm sure a few more will jump on, and glad we can record it to share it at a later point in time. So yes, absolutely, Cam. When you came to me and asked me to do the webinars, yeah, obviously very excited about the opportunity, simply because it's a topic that the team at Rosterfy are very passionate about. And I think it's even more topical at the moment during COVID-19, given the community engagement aspect of how people can get out and about and help when the time is right, and what else can they do to get involved in their community. So what I did want to share today was a few learnings that we've taken from working with a number of clients across the globe over the last 4 years, and how that can relate to large organizations, mid-tier organizations, and then also grassroots organizations as well. So definitely be looking forward to it, and looking forward to going through how it relates to us and what we do as we go. So on the Rosterfy side, for those who aren't aware, what we offer is a SaaS-based software system that helps organizations better schedule, recruit, screen, and manage their workforce. Predominantly, it's around volunteer scheduling and management, but we also do focus in areas of payroll that can help with casual staff management as well. So we're Melbourne-based. We have an office in the US, a satellite office in Dubai, and also office in UK. And part of our growth over the years has come from working with major events, but our mission and our trajectory going forward is to also look at how we can help smaller sporting federations and grassroots organisations in the sporting vertical, but across not-for-profits, universities and cities. Our passion and mission is all about connecting communities to events and causes that they're passionate about. And hopefully today, from what I can share with you all, are a couple of key learnings that we've taken over that mission as well. So just to break it down a little, and to make sure that this goes as smoothly as it can, I've included 4 case studies, and between each 2 of the case studies, a bit of a Q&A section as well. So I think Cam's going to moderate if the questions do come in, but please feel free to contribute where you can. The first 2 case studies that I'll run through is the NFL Huddle for 100, and also the Miami Dolphins, who are a client of Rosterfy, looking at how they have engaged the South Florida community and their membership base into giving back and actually volunteering on behalf of their football team. So there's really interesting and I guess insightful learnings that we can take from there. Through to looking at how Tough Mudder and the Super Bowl actually manage their volunteer workforce. Tough Mudder being obviously a large global obstacle race, and the Super Bowl being the Super Bowl. And a client we've been fortunate to work with in the last 4 years now, and have definitely learned a lot about best practice when it comes to volunteer management across the board. We'll then finish with some Q&A. So jumping into the first section that I wanted to touch on, and an initiative that's really come to light for us, I guess our team at Rosterfy in the last month or so is, and being sports mad myself, and as many of the Rosterfy team are, is looking at within the sports sector and the team space at the moment, across federations, across professional leagues, and then also community competitions. There obviously is a grinding halt on what we can do in terms of on-field play and on-field contributions. But I think there's a lot we can learn from an initiative that the NFL introduced last year. It was called the Huddle for 100. And what it did was actually encapsulated the whole NFL community, including fans, players, and staff for these teams, and actually had a single purpose about how do they contribute and promote volunteerism and meaningful contributions throughout the country. As an initiative that they introduced because it was the league's 100th season last year, it's not something they've done year on year, and it was definitely an initiative that came from, I guess, the ground up across the NFL, but then also fed through every single team on their roster. And while it is the NFL, I think the model they've used can actually be replicated across any league or any community team if you put your mind in the right areas. And so hopefully out of this, I can share some of the learnings at the NFL and what they implemented and how it can relate to more grassroots teams and leagues, or the AFL, NRL, and a number of the big leagues here in Australia. So the program and what they did was they tracked minutes logged in community volunteerism by club fans, staff, and players throughout the course of the 2019 year. So the NFL came up with the initiative, and then they empowered each one of their clubs to coordinate their not-for-profit partners with their fan community, and how do they actually better schedule, manage, and build their fans into a purpose and actually give back to the club outside of coming to the games. And when you hear the term fan engagement, this is all about fan engagement Monday to Friday. How do you engage your fans Monday to Friday to give back and provide meaningful contributions? So the aim that they set out to achieve was to have 1 million people volunteer 100 minutes of their time to reach a goal of 100 million minutes donated. And the results were, over the course of the season, they almost quadrupled the number of minutes volunteered. So they almost hit 400 million minutes volunteered across all their clubs across the league. They managed to run events in 50 states. And so what these events were was groups of volunteers helping at a food bank, volunteers going out and helping at schools, volunteers going out helping at shopping sprees at supermarkets, and helping people who are less privileged get in and access different areas of the community that they couldn't do previously. I think in the world of the AFL at the moment, we see players doing the community work and going to schools. But I think if we put a bit more imagination to it, there's a lot more of the fans and the membership base that can give back and represent the club. And I'll follow through and talk about that with the Miami Dolphins in a minute as well. 757 years of donated time all up. And they valued that donated time was about $160 million in contributions back to the community itself. A pretty staggering number for an initiative that was only put forward at the start of the season. Obviously, Roger Goodell was fairly proud as the commissioner and, I guess, top of the tree in terms of what was being able to be achieved. And he said it brought fans and communities together, and the impact will be felt for the next 100 seasons of the NFL. So what I'll do is I'll jump into a little bit more of a case study around the Miami Dolphins and the way they've actually implemented the program. They are a client of ours and have been for about 3 years now. And so I think here is a great case study of how it may be the Miami Dolphins, but it might also be from Geelong, the Geelong West Football Club. How do they bring their 50 to 100 fans and get them involved in the community if there's no play on the field, or if there's nothing that they can actually give back from a monetary base? What else can they do to contribute and represent the club? So Miami Dolphins. So this was an initiative that they have actually led the way in. And I'll touch on in a second how they actually won the competition for the Huddle for 100 last year. So their aim was a program to engage their fans to join them in making South Florida a better place. So as the quote says, the Dolphins have many fans that want to be a force for change in our community, but don't want that commitment to be limited to monetary contributions. Special Teams allows them to show their dedication to the community by donating their sweat equity. And so I don't know the stats, but I know there's a lot more fans out there for every AFL and NRL and sporting team that aren't paid up members, but also want to represent the club and be proud of being a supporter. So this is an initiative that actually encompasses everything without actually money changing hands. Some of the statistics that were phenomenal, obviously us at Rosterfy are very proud to be part of, was there was 30,000 volunteers that took place in the program. There's about $5.5 million in value given back to the local community. There was 254,000 volunteer hours contributed, and then around 300 meals packed. And that food bank and that meals packing is something that we see in the news regularly. If it's in Australia and the US over the COVID-19 period, it's a very, I guess, simple way to give back to the community in need at the moment. And I think there's some really quick wins that can be had. The way the NFL communicated it was actually through leaderboards. And what they did is each month, the team that gave back the most number of volunteer hours was rewarded with a $5,000 grant. And across the year, the club that gave back the most volunteer minutes, they actually were granted $100,000 as well. So for an entity like the NFL to probably do it on a $5,000 a month to $100,000, no more than probably $2,000 of investment from that scale, it's not an initiative that takes a lot of money or ROI, I guess, upfront, but the ROI long term, when you look at social inclusion and community in the way they've given back is fairly phenomenal in itself. So it's an initiative that we've actually been really proud of. We've got the Atlanta Hawks doing a similar program. We've got a number of NFL teams we're talking to, but it's something that hopefully over the journey, if it's grassroots to mid-tier to then sporting federations, it's something that could be put in place as well. And there is a video on the NFL site that sums it up incredibly well that I recommend everyone has a look at and understands how it can be best applied to them. A couple of the learnings. So looking at it from a volunteer engagement perspective, that the Miami Dolphins, I guess, implemented that, but then I guess took in place was around reward and recognition. So a very simple model of a point system to incentivize engagement. Engaging organizations. So don't think of it as 35,000 individuals. It's about looking at the groups and making sure that the groups are engaged. So whether it this be going out to, I guess, local groups in the community and seeing how you can give back, or actually dissecting up your own sporting club and community, whether it be the netball teams and the football teams and whatever it might be, how across your club can you build in reward and recognition programs to then represent the amount of goodwill and community engagement that's coming out of your club as well. And then community. So I think just even the phrase community is very powerful. And I think using that more often in your vocab when discussing initiatives across your team and club and I guess federation, it's just something that's really powerful and can relate to a number of areas to give back. So it's more than just fans, more than members. It's actually building that community and seeing how you can measure your ability to give back to those that need it around your club and the community itself. Which leads me to the first Q&A, and Cam, I know hopefully there's one or two that you've got there, but it's a fairly impressive initiative that I wanted to share, and hopefully people can see how it looks across the spectrum of sport and what they'll put in place.
Absolutely. Thanks, Bennett. There's been a couple of questions that have fed through after that first session, and it's really interesting to see how the NFL certainly drove engagement and almost gamified the volunteer hours across all their clubs with leaderboards and so forth. You've probably led to it a little bit with some of your answers there, but the first question is, why do you think the huddle for 100 was so successful? Was it because of the reward and recognition? Was it because of that competitive nature across the clubs? What led it to being such a great success?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say that most of the programs we've seen when it comes to volunteerism over the journey have always been about having a strong purpose and strong story that can be shared. And so I don't think there's many more things that people are passionate about than actually representing their club and their team. And so I think having I guess that figure point of the club being the purpose that brings everyone together is extremely strong. And then I think also the competitiveness as well. So how can your volunteers then compete against the Collingwood Football Club's volunteers or the Carlton Football Club volunteers? And how do you build that reward and recognition that's obviously very powerful?
Bennett, there's one here from Ricketts come through here. Is exactly what role does Rosterfy play in the Huddle 100, and what role did Rosterfy play in making Huddle 100 so successful, and how did you power that program?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we were involved with was the Miami Dolphins. So they won the actual Huddle for 100, and Rosterfy as a platform is built around harnessing mass workforce management. So the Rosterfy platform is set up that Miami Dolphins can have it on their website. A fan would see a landing page that says, "Yes, I want to volunteer." When they click on that volunteer link, that then becomes a registration form that's on the Rosterfy platform. And then it's about using Rosterfy as the tool to better engage, advertise upcoming opportunities, upcoming shifts, and actually then tracking what volunteers are doing, screening them, and then actually measuring the output from the whole workforce scheduling element. So we were part of the Miami Dolphins, and hopefully many more teams coming up as well.
Beautiful. And I think there's one last question on this particular section is there, do you see something like the Huddle 100 being adopted by Australian or other international sporting leagues across the country, or how would they go about adopting something similar?
I think so. Yeah, I think it's an initiative that everyone can understand, and it's something that if I think the right people in the right sporting organisations can get their head around, I don't think it takes a whole lot to implement. And I think at the club level at the moment, I know they're looking for ways to include and advertise things to their members about do they want refunds on membership? What are they doing with the rest of the season? There's certainly no shortage of ways to get their team involved in community work and ways to track that. So I think, yeah, I can't see there are any barriers to a initiative like this being run here in Australia or in the rest of the world. To be honest, it can be rolled out in a fairly I guess easy and small way to test and then scale up from there. So we're definitely interested in investigating it and pushing it further as well.
Fantastic, Bennett. That's all the questions from your first section there, mate.
No problems. Okay, so the second half, what I'll go through here is more around volunteer, I guess, management and the scheduling element. And obviously, Rosterfy has been involved with a number of event management companies, sporting federations, and universities, cities, and councils about how do they harness the volunteers and better schedule them. Volunteers give a whole heap of their time, but we know that it's time consuming and there can be a lot of admin involved to better keep on top of it. So Tough Mudder, they were one of our first clients and they actually rolled out Rosterfy on a global scale, all with the purpose of and the idea and concept being how do they build a workforce brand, engage volunteers on a global scale. And I think building a workforce brand and engaging volunteers is something that can go across the scale of organisations as well. So the numbers that the program for Tough Mudder involved they were looking at about 55 events per year across 3 continents. They had 120,000 global volunteer community on their database. There was typically around 500 to 600 volunteers per event day, working a number of areas across the event site. And there's only 3 workforce coordinators steering this program in New York, and then a couple of people coming on during seasonal work in Australia and their other regions. So we were really pumped to be able to power this program because with 3 workforce coordinators, they were able to increase the actual retention and engagement of their volunteers by at least 50%. They then better manage their workforce to reduce any paid staff requirements in volunteer roles, which saved them about $1 million. And there was probably $1.5 million in the first 18 months. And it really, I guess, showed the scale of how Rosterfy can streamline processes when looking at that volunteer management arm itself. Some of the learnings that we took away from the program for Tough Mudder was all about the communications and consistency. So how to manage your volunteer comms, your emails, your EDMs, so that you provide your volunteers with a better experience. And volunteer management can be far from consistent when it's either weekend after weekend and people are pulling out or coming into shifts and you're rotating those members or those volunteers. But keeping a very clear communication path really helped them engage and keep their volunteers up to speed. They had a lot of macro management, so empowering volunteers to recruit on their own behalf. So bringing in scout groups, university groups, city organisation, even corporate groups to give back and volunteer. There's a lot of initiatives when you need to look outside your own circles to bring in groups to help increase volunteer numbers. And then the welfare as well. So the welfare of what they implemented was really powerful. So they had different countries were obviously on the platform across USA, UK, and Australia. But then they always put the welfare of the volunteers first. So they had very detailed briefings that the volunteers completed. They also had very clear communications about emergency management. So once they had the template of how to do it once, they could then replicate it multiple times. And it was something that made a lot of sense, and obviously does make a lot of sense. But in the, I guess, cut and thrust of workforce management and volunteer management, sometimes those policies and things can be put to the back burner, but it really made life easy for them to scale up and better manage their volunteer program. One of the small things they did was looking at, okay, what are the steps involved in our program for volunteer management across the season? So what they did was had a very clear program, start to end, of once you register as a volunteer, what is your pathway with this from there? So it's essentially their own mini pathway program. Each shift they were given headbands. They were then able to track when they logged into their Rosterfy portal how many shifts they've completed. And they're always able to share on social media, invite friends, do multiple shifts so that they're actually rewarded and recognised for their efforts. And it wasn't just the participants getting the glory, it was actually the volunteers themselves. So if you're looking forward to the season ahead or the event season coming up, pulling together a clear timetable of when volunteers will be communicated and what their pathway is will definitely help with retention as well. And finally, the last case study I wanted to share was around the Super Bowl volunteer program. So the Super Bowl, each year, they aim to have 10,000 volunteers that volunteer at least 3 shifts across the 7 days leading up to the Super Bowl. So one of the challenges that each city that the Super Bowl goes to has is how do they actually harness the passion of your city volunteer community and then automate manual processes. Dealing with 10,000 volunteers on any scale is tough, but doing it with such a high profile event and managing it on very strict schedules is even tougher. So there was a number of learnings that came to the fore when we worked with the Super Bowl. When they implement Rosterfy, they do it from about 12 to 13 months before the next Super Bowl. So, for instance, Miami, who had it this year, they basically launched their registration just as the Atlanta Super Bowl finished. And some of the statistics from the Atlanta Super Bowl, as you can see here, are fairly significant. So this is the information we pulled from Rosterfy at the end of their program. You can see there's 500,000 emails have been sent. A lot of the shift changes that can be the heartache of any volunteer manager's role and lead to many sleepless nights was all automated. So there's 9,743 automated changes to shifts. And we also had one individual who changed their shifts 15 times in 1 week. And we don't always love those people, but if they turn up to their shifts and do a good job, then that's the main thing at the end of the day. When we look at the demographics from a program this size, you can sort of see the generation split. So Generation X, millennials, and baby boomers, and I guess it's a reasonable spread across those. It's not obviously the older generation volunteering anymore. There's actually a lot to be said about the younger generation and people wanting to give back and be a lot more community minded. And I think if people are led to these initiatives and led to the opportunity to give back, then they definitely will. It's just about letting them know where to find the opportunities to start with. And you can see the Super Bowl was attended from 39 states. And across the Atlanta week, they had to be in 100 locations. So we're really passionate about the event in the Super Bowl and I'm obviously very proud of what we've been able to achieve with them as well. This whole sector about major volunteer management, I think it can go to a number of scale as well. So the biggest learnings from Super Bowl were give yourself enough time, 12 months planning and clear timelines to get the numbers you need. For a Super Bowl, they registered 35,000 volunteers to get 10,000. So always be mindful of the drop-off rate as much as you want to reduce it. Automated shift changes was really powerful within Rosterfy. And then obviously how to engage the community in the town so that you bring your volunteers together to create a brand. Also very powerful in itself. What Rosterfy does is essentially 6 steps. It's a white label product that you as the admin and the organization, you can actually label up. So it's got your logo and branding. You can then register your volunteers. And then every step of the way through, you're communicating, engaging and delivering that workforce program. And then you can build certificates, thank yous, reward and recognition into it post event and post shift. So it's a full loop. And we have organizations with 10 to 20, 30 volunteers using it, all the way up to a Super Bowl with 10,000 volunteers. And the final slide, given where we're at with COVID-19, was just a few tips that our team have put together. So how do we better engage volunteers during COVID-19 if there's no, I guess, on-site or in-person events happening? So keep up the communication, so via volunteers and, I guess, portal, email and SMS. Make sure that comms is really transparent and upfront. Planning ahead as well. Surveys and, I guess, online training is really valuable. Looking at updating your website, so make sure that any of the wording around that, I guess, is updated, so you're not actually advertising events or opportunities that you hadn't thought about and just haven't looked back on. And make sure registration links are updated. And what we're learning a lot at the moment is actually how do you as the organization give back to your members and give back to the volunteers. So you obviously have a lot of ability to communicate to a large group of people. How do you share with them some awesome stories, things that they should be excited about, what they can look forward to after COVID-19's finished, or hopefully finish soon, and what can they do to actually get excited about it. So think of it as the opportunity to spark their day and give them something to be proud of. And hopefully those tips relate to everyone on this call. And with that, Cam, that's the conclusion.
Beautiful. Thanks, Bennett. There's a couple of questions that have come through. One of the ones, just reading it here, is most clubs are managed by the usual suspect of volunteers, and it's often hard to reach the outliers in a club who are reluctant to get involved. How does Rosterfy help to reward existing volunteers, but also help better engage the outliers in the club who don't want to be a volunteer?
I guess one, you got to find out what motivates them. I've seen a lot of different initiatives in clubs to get them to sign up to the social clubs and different member committees. But a learning from Miami Dolphins is what they did was they tracked how many hours or how many shifts somebody volunteered. And for every 5 shifts, they then got 10% off their season membership, or 10% off the Thursday night meal, or 10% off a hot dog on game day. So if you can relate it to your club, how can you create a very small leaderboard, have it public for people to see, so those who give back actually are recognised, and those who don't probably already recognised, like people paying their subs or not paying their subs. But very simple leaderboard that can then incentivise people based on $10 off their next club hoodie or anything from that, but just building in a very simple reward and recognition system that relates to your club, because generation 18 to 25, it's all about gamification. And if they can prove that they've done more compared to their friend, they're going to boast about it. So no matter what it is, I think having people with that level of competition helps a lot.
Beautiful. Thanks, Bennett. There's a couple other questions if you've got a moment, and everyone, I know we're just on 1 o'clock. We'll be wrapped up in the next 5 minutes or so. They're very large clients on a big scale that you've sort of touched on there. What learnings do you think the Miami Dolphins, the Tough Mudders, the NFLs of this world can be applied to grassroots or smaller event type organisations?
Yeah, I think I touched on it, a few of them there actually, in terms of the scale that you need to operate on. I think perhaps having someone with a little bit more time dedicated to an initiative like this could be very valuable. So having someone to drive it within the organisation. And if you're struggling to get any of the outside the usual suspects involved, try and get someone who's not involved to actually lead it and give them some, I guess, goals to achieve. So I think the reward and recognition element, having a common cause of what you want to achieve, and then trying to, I guess, set the competitive levels across other clubs in the area makes a lot of difference as well.
Beautiful. And probably the last one that's come through here is so Rosterfy has worked with a large scale of events and large scale events in the US and internationally with Tough Mudder. Who else does Rosterfy work with more locally here in Australia and abroad from a sports perspective? And where's Rosterfy heading in the next 5 years or so?
Yeah, absolutely. So all about obviously community engagement and building that workforce and how that can be seen to be giving back. We want to work really closely with clubs to bring what's happening in the USA back to Australia. We're also productizing the platform to have a rapid core and enterprise solution. So the rapid solution can work for 10, 20, 30 volunteers and actually work really well for local clubs. And it's only something we're releasing in the last 3 months. So definitely keen to talk to clubs about that. And over time, we're looking at working with universities, for profits, and cities, as well as the sporting federations itself. So we've got a number of things happening at the moment, and keen to follow up as people need in those 3 or 4 verticals that we're looking at.
Beautiful. Well, Bennett, thanks very much for joining us today. Everyone who's joined us, Bennett's contact details are on the screen in front of us. If not, you might want to check out the Rosterfy website, rosterfy.com, where all the great work that the team are completing and case studies are all online. A fantastic platform, a fantastic product that's being rolled out across the sporting community. So, Bennett, really appreciate your time today. Thanks for joining us. And good luck for the rest of the year. And hopefully we come through the other side of COVID-19 and we're all back playing sport and getting out and about and being able to meet each other in person in the not too distant future.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks very much, Cam. Really appreciate it.
No worries. Everyone, thanks for jumping on today. That wraps up today's edition of The Full Stack. One thing for those who haven't joined us in the past, we have recently launched our podcast called The Full Stack as well. We've got a range of special guests on there, so access it wherever you get your podcast. Just type in The Full Stack, and there's 2 to 3 episodes out there to listen to, with a new episode coming out every 2 weeks. So thanks very much, and we'll look forward to seeing you at the same time next week. Have a great afternoon, everyone.